Before we jump into today's second video with the artifact tier list for Black Friday, I just want to give a quick notice to the surprise shop. It's only 24 hours that it's available, so make sure you jump on this, especially the 6-star mega rank up ticket. Holy crap, I cannot describe eloquently and quickly how good the value is here. 6-star mega rank up ticket essentially for free. Just grab it, boom, done. The tokens, I think, are a good deal, but it's not going to appeal to everybody. But I would only really purchase them for the two most recent team-up collections, Avengers or Symbiotes, because they have the most value. Also, the Carbonadium, for me personally, it has enough value. I know for most players it won't have enough value because there's no crystals, there's no other rewards. It's just 1,000 Carbo. But my whole logic is if you add a 0 to both numbers, would I pay $110 for 10,000 Carbonadium? Yeah, I probably would. 10,000 Carbonadium is like 2 characters worth. So yeah, it's pretty good in that sense. I'll probably end up buying the whole shop, but at least I'll get the selector for the tokens and the 6-star mega rank up ticket. Now, diving into the artifact guide here and ranking. There are over 200. Right now, there are 208 artifacts. So if you get a selector that is not tied to an update, for example, I have this artifact selector in my inventory, and you press acquire, you will see there's just so many. There's so many. Now, because of that, we're not going to be ranking and talking about every single artifact at the same time in this video, because the video would be like 3 days. I've already pre-ranked a bunch of artifacts that are low value. We'll get to that in a second. But 3 artifacts are missing from this video. I don't have the artwork out of game for Molten Man and Hydro Man, so those are missing, but they're both low value because they're bad artifacts and they're bad characters. And then for Sleeper, he's a pretty good character with a pretty good artifact. Unfortunately, I don't have his artwork either. That one is going to be probably decent or PvP value because it gives him a heal and it gives him HP, increased HP for a certain amount of time. So it makes him tankier. So just keep that in mind for those characters. In general, here with the artifact tier list, I'm ranking them on 2 metrics. One is the character good, and are they used, are they meta? And then 2 is the artifact good, and is the artifact going to allow you, like, give you a lot of value in return for the character? So for example, you have a character like Sharon Rogers. Why is her artifact in low value, Alex? She's a really high damage tier 4. Well, the issue with Sharon Rogers is that although she is a high value, like a high DPS tier 4, her artifact is very bad. 1, and then 2, you can actually farm her artifact for free. So there's very few reasons why you would ever choose her artifact from a selector. So I'm taking these things into consideration. For Falcon and Wiccan specifically, they're in low value because right now they're not good and their artifacts are not great, but they have future value because Wiccan could get a tier 4 and a rework for Agatha all along, and then Falcon absolutely will get a tier 4 and a new uniform for the Brave New World update movie tie-in whenever that actually gets released. Cyclops, possibility here that he gets something just because he's the only tier 4 who didn't get a uniform with their tier 4, and he is tied heavily to X-Men 97 if we ever see an update for that. So that's why those 4 are there. It's not, you know, some of these artifacts here are good. Some of them are bad, like Sharon's, but these characters are good or can be good in the future. But again, it's measured on multiple metrics, right? Like Human Torch, pretty good character. Artifact, pretty useless. So that's basically how it pans out. For decent, again, it's more of the same thing. You have a bunch of tier 4s here at the top. You have some situationally useful stuff, like if you're going to go all in on Echo for PvP, you're going to need her artifact. If you're going to play Loki for ABX, ABL, you need his artifact. Same thing goes with Luna, despite the fact that both these artifacts are kind of bad. It basically just goes that way. These are exceedingly character specific. So you have to be going all in on these characters, which means tier 4ing them, etc., for these artifacts to be worthwhile at all. If you're not going all in on these characters, then these artifacts are not worth it, and you should just skip, right? Especially like leaving them at level 6, level 70, level 80, tier 3. These artifacts aren't going to do anything because the majority of their ability scales with instinct, and you get the majority of your instinct from tier 4. So with that out of the way, oh yeah, we've already ranked one other category because there's just so many artifacts. Support characters. These are all of the best support artifacts in the game. I may be missing 1 or 2, but they're not going to be very good. They're going to be very, very niche, and we already have a lot of really niche artifacts. Like this one is a heal, but nobody uses it. This one applies to like 5 characters because it's only Gamma Radiation ally. This applies to like 6 characters because it's only the Annihilator's allies, and so on and so forth. I've tried to rank them within each other, so as you go closer to the top and closer to the left, they get more valuable. I think either Sin or Valkyrie has the best artifact, the most useful artifact in the game. It really just depends your roster and who you use, but Valkyrie's is the most flexible because it applies to all allies all the time, as well as all of her buffs, right? She has no restrictions whatsoever, whereas Sin has some restrictions to villains only. And that's basically how it goes. I am overvaluing Agent Venom's here right now because I am expecting Null to be broken OP. We already know Silver Surfer's really good. Spider-Man's good. Carnage is going to be good. A lot of very strong symbiotes to sway the battle for PvP. But technically, in terms of how many characters this artifact buffs, it should be down here. Okay, just keep that in mind. That's kind of there's a bit of a personal bias, but also recognizing the possibility there when the synergy with symbiotes. So yeah, that basically does it for all of the not so important artifacts. So sorry, not so important, and then support artifacts. Support artifacts are fantastic, amazing. You should consider getting anything in the top row. Anything in the top row is going to be pretty good value for you, as long as you have the character, obviously. And anything in the bottom 2 rows, you probably shouldn't get, whether it's low value or decent. Now we can start filling everything else out, and I could talk about these ones a little bit individually because they, you know, have value that you can kind of count on. With Emma and Absorbing Man, they apply reflect abilities. They give them the chance to reflect. Same thing with Destroyer. So this is good for PvP if reflect is something that you're going to be playing into. You have other sort of not amazing PvP characters, but still Gilgamesh, you know, can do some work in Alliance Conquest and stuff like that. You also have the immortality characters like Magic, where again the character might not be that great, or Mr. Sinister, but because the immortality artifact adds so much value there, you do have something to play with for PvP specifically. You also have characters like Kang, who their artifact is easy to farm, and they're pretty good PvP characters. Theirs is just like increased damage. It's tough to say. Listen, as far as these artifacts go, these artifacts are going to be more useful to the character than Kang's is to Kang. But is Kang a better PvP character than all of these? Yes, he is. So again, it really depends. You can move the needle back and forth whether you think the character is better or whether you think the artifact is more valuable for the character. That's really where a little bit of your own judgment has to come into play, because otherwise it becomes too difficult to really rank the artifact. There's no objective way to say when you're comparing these two metrics, because in some ways they're completely opposite, right? Or not completely opposite, but they're not necessarily that closely aligned. You know, Absorbing Man's artifact is amazing for him. It gives him a heal based on how much he reflects. It's fantastic. However, it's bad. Like, he's not a very good character compared to like Kang. So, you know, you have to. And then Kang's artifact is not that good. So you kind of have to gauge it both ways. Cersei's is kind of a no-brainer here. It's one of the best because she still hangs on when most other characters are banned, which is quite nice. And then you have other, you know, lesser known or lesser used immortality artifacts like Sabretooth that still gives him access to that ability. Hela's very good for PvP because it gives her that immortality. Really nice there. Obviously, Wolverine. But with Wolverine, you start to get into wanting a higher level artifact, and we'll talk about that a little bit later and what that means for him. But yeah, we can get through some of the PvE stuff as well. Captain America's tough. His artifact is not great. I would honestly put it in decent now that I think about it, but I still think it's good enough to warrant maybe the top of decent. Doctor Strange, I don't like his artifact. It's not very good, but because he's so overwhelmingly good, I'm still going to put it in PvE. This is a rare situation where I think the character's value just sort of trumps the value of the artifact a little bit. Spider-Man, very, very good for PvP, but you would probably want at least... That's tough. You probably want at least a 4-star version of his artifact. I know they gave it away for free, but I think you want at least a 4-star version because of it. Dr. Octopus, it's just a PvE artifact. Very straightforward. It's ABX, ABL kind of stuff. Some of these characters are not necessarily meta. You're going to see Namor. You're going to see Iron Man. But their artifacts are very powerful. Very, very powerful artifacts. Scale their damage tremendously. So if you have any intention of using these characters for PvE, that's going to matter a lot. So I'm ranking them alongside some ABX, ABL guys. I should probably put Dr. Octopus up here in the ABL, ABX category. I didn't initially because he has competition from other characters like Hulk, etc. Hulk artifact is just so good. I think everybody should try to get at least a 4-star version because it's so versatile, right? It buffs his HP, which also buffs his damage, so it means it's amazing for PvE and PvP. Carnage, he's going to struggle with just a 4-star version of his artifact, so you probably want a 5 or a 6-star. Again, it's the immortality one. Ghost Rider can probably get away with a 4-star, so I'll put him there, but it's the same ability. It's the same ability type where it's a you know, it's a immortality effect. Spider-Gwen's is mostly PvP, so I'll put her there somewhere kind of in the middle of Kang and Gore. Kind of makes sense. Maybe a little bit lower would work. Venom, again, not necessarily meta for ABX ABL, but just a pretty decent artifact. It's not as good, I would say, as Thor, Iron Man, or Namor, but still good enough. It gives him HP, it gives him damage, it gives him, you know, that kind of stuff. Madeline, again, it's immortality. You probably want at least a 4-star, but I would probably just put it down here in PvP. She's not really going to be able to hang with Spider-Man and Hulk in the crew. Deadpool has got a rework, I believe, and it's the immortality effect now. You probably want at least a 4-star version of that for PvP. It's quite useful. Jean's artifact is not great, but she's still very good. So I would say... that's a tough one. Jean's a tough one. She's still very good. I would say, I know this looks messy as hell, but I need to highlight that some of these artifacts are just straight up farmable. So you shouldn't be choosing them from selectors at all, because you can just farm them absolutely for free, and it'll save people the heartache of accidentally choosing from a selector an artifact that they can actually get for free. So nulls will be here eventually, but yeah, these are all farmable from their world boss legend stages. So you should not farm them, you know, you shouldn't farm them using selectors. That's not a good idea. Gamora, same sort of thing with a lot of these other PvE guys. She's just a solid PvE character, not really meta, but still good enough. Magneto, same sort of thing, good enough. You could almost put him in ABX ABL. But we're not gonna go that far here. Odin, again, it's just a decent artifact for a decent character, like I'd say a good artifact for a good character. I wouldn't go as far as to say decent. Strifes is needed for PvP for sure. It gives him access to healing, but he's still sort of pseudo support these days. Thanos got a rework. His is really big. You probably want that 4-star or up because it gives him damage, I believe, and HP now. Apocalypse, again, needed for PvP. Because it gives him that revive. It's pretty huge. Pretty much, it's like a must-have for these characters if you want to use them in PvP. That's how you can kind of read things. Dooms is okay. Dooms is okay. He's okay. We'll just put him in decent. I don't want to rehash the whole Doom thing, guys. Yeah, it's not pretty. Captain Marvel, again, just like a solid character, solid artifact. You know, good damage. Not necessarily meta, but good. Same thing with Black Bolt. Again, these artifacts are good enough where I don't think it makes sense to put them into decent. There needs to be sort of a different category. Black Widow's like slipping from PvP, but still it gives her access to the Giga Dodge, which synergizes really well with her Tier 4 ability. Hope technically has a support artifact, but she's also ABX ABL, so we're just going to put her there because it matches both anyways. Sentry, he's the GOAT for PvP. You want to get your hands on at least a 4-star version of his artifact, possibly higher. It's just very, very good. Adam, I think at this point, needs a 6-star version of his artifact or as close to that as possible, just because of the healing that it provides him, and he kind of needs that at this point to really, you know, to really function. Cable, not ABX ABL meta anymore, but still good, still a decent artifact. Actually, a very good artifact for him. It buffs his damage quite a lot. Psylocke is meta for ABX ABL, so you got to put her artifact up there, even though it's just a guaranteed extra crit. Scarlet Witch, same sort of thing here. Not the greatest artifact itself, but they are meta, so you kind of have to. It's tough. It's tough. You kind of have to respect the artifact and the value it provides. Silver Surfer, fantastic character, decent artifact, I would say. Try to get your hands on a 4-star version of it, but it's not going to you know, make or break the character. Rachel, it gives her revive, absolutely necessary for PvP if you want to use her. So you basically can't use these characters for PvP unless you get these artifacts. That's what that means. Quicksilver, same sort of thing, kind of necessary, needed, because it gives him access to that Giga Dodge. Probably a little bit better than Black Widow. Probably better than Strife, and probably better than Cersei. I don't know if he's better than Rachel, though. That's interesting. That's an interesting conversation. Dakin and X-23, I really like their artifacts. They are needed for PvP. They're not great, but they're similar to the immortality artifacts. They're similar to also Black Swan. They're basically based on Black Swan's ability that she got when she was released. But yeah, they're pretty good. Gladiator, again, needed for ABX ABL, so you definitely want to respect that. Rogue, no longer needed for ABX ABL, but still solid, and her artifact is pretty good, so I would put her probably around the Cable Captain Marvel region. Storm, again, just solid PvE character and pretty good artifact there. I actually didn't remember what these artifacts did, so I had to go and look them up. Kahori gets access to the Giga Dodge, so I would say that that's pretty solid for PvP, and she's all right for PvP with the support ability, so you got to respect that. Victorious actually has a support artifact, which I think everyone forgot about for Universal Allies, so that's pretty cool, but I wouldn't rate it too highly just because it doesn't do too much, and she's not too great. So around Franklin, Ebony Maw level is fine. Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman, both good for PvP. Decent, I'd say, for PvP if you go kind of all in on their builds. I would say they probably go around the Strife level, and their artifacts are helpful and useful for that. Probably needed or very, very close to being needed for both of them if you want to make the most out of their action in PvP. Beta Ray Bill, again, just a solid PvE character with a decent artifact. It only increases his attack. I'd say Storms is a little bit better here, but it's still he's good enough. War Machine, like it's kind of bottom of the barrel. You're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel here, but he's also a support, so it's pretty decent. And then Mantis is actually surprisingly good as a support in PvP. So getting her artifact, although I'd probably put it in the decent category below the tier 4s, around like Ancient One, it's not a bad artifact. You could make an argument that for PvP it's a little bit more useful because she has some nice burst damage with her Awakening ability. So this is essentially how it shakes out. I know we went really rapid fire through this, and I didn't get to talk too much about any one particular artifact, but I think the overall, the macro, the big picture stuff is important here. The low value artifacts are either really bad artifacts for okay characters, or they're okay artifacts for really bad characters. And it's essentially going to take a huge rework with a tier 4 and a uniform for any of these artifacts to be elevated beyond the decent category, besides the ones that I highlighted at the beginning from Cyclops to Falcon. In the decent category, you have artifacts that are now starting to generate some value for characters that are actually also going to generate value for your roster. Again, you're still going to have some specificity, you're still going to have some niche ability, but you also have a lot of tier 4s here that are going to be able to scale up the value of the artifact because of its ability to synergize with Instinct. This is where I think that most people are going to disagree with me, where they're going to say, okay, no, Luna's artifact is a must-have for ABX ABL, Loki's artifact is a must-have for ABX ABL, etc. Again, it depends on how hard you build these characters. Obviously, if you're trying to get top scores in ABX ABL, you're going to want to pick up those two artifacts. You're going to want them 4-star, 5-star, 6-star versions. That makes sense. On the flip side, if you're really into PvP, if you're really into Otherworld Battle, you're maxing out tier 4 Angel, you're maxing out tier 4 Doctor Doom, maybe even Blue Dragon, and then you want those artifacts. But I can't tell everybody in the game to go and pick up Blue Dragon's artifact, because let's be real, like most players just don't care, and most players don't have those builds. So again, a lot of this stuff is situational. Once we get into the PvP stuff, these characters I can just say pretty confidently that they're not going to be able to do this game mode that I've highlighted here unless you get this artifact. They're kind of reliant on that artifact to even be relevant. However, when you do get that artifact, they're pretty relevant. And obviously it scales from like the least relevant down here with Gilgamesh to the most relevant up here with Hela, APOC, Quicksilver, Rachel, and Maddie, with, I would say, a lean towards Otherworld Battle because I don't play Alliance Conquest as much as I should. PvE stuff, same sort of thing as PvE. If you want them to excel in PvE, you're going to want to pick up these artifacts. Again, it depends on the character. Some of these artifacts are much stronger than others. I'd say the first 3 you're going to notice a huge bump in the damage, whereas for Venom and War Machine, maybe like Venom and Beta Ray Bill and Blue or Black Bolt, you're not going to notice as much of a bump in the damage compared to the ones at the top, but you're still going to notice a bump there. Maybe move Doctor Strange down a little bit, even though he is ABX ABL meta. The characters here in ABX ABL, it doesn't mean that they're the only characters that are meta for ABX ABL. I recognize there's obviously quite a few more, including Doctor Strange. But the thing is that these artifacts are going to scale their damage tremendously in ABX ABL because of the effects that they provide. Whereas Doctor Strange's artifact, it's pretty bad. So he's very, very good. The artifact's not going to make a humongous difference to his scores. Support artifacts, fairly straightforward. They support, so they're always valuable. Farmable artifacts should never be chosen from selectors because they're farmable. And then these ones here, in my opinion, are just characters that are very meta or very, very close to being uber meta. And you should try to get your hands on a either at least 4-star or at least 5 to 6-star artifact for them, because of the effects that they provide are tremendous to these characters, and these characters themselves are very meta. So hopefully that helps you out. Thank you so much for watching the video. Smash the like button if you enjoyed the content, or the thumbs down if you hated it. And I will see you. I'll see you on the live stream later today. Take care.